Chapter 19, verse 17, Lo tisna et achilcha bilvavecha, hocheach tocheach et amitecha velo tisa alav chet. You shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart, reprove your kinsmen, but, or and, it's not clear, incur no guilt. Don't sin because of him or it, not clear. Don't hate your brother, don't hate your kinsmen in your heart. Make sure to reprove them and don't bear sin because of it or him. What's going on? Many different interpretations. Rashi says that the sin that you have to be careful of is halbanat panim, which literally means whitening someone's face. It means embarrassing them in public. Somebody does something, it's not okay. You have to be very careful if you give rebuke that you don't commit a sin by doing the rebuking, which is that you pile one sin on while trying to get rid of another one. However, that's not the only opinion. And by the way, when you read it that way, it's surely rebuke, but don't bear sin because of it, right? Don't bear. So that's where the but comes in there in reading the vit. Go ahead and rebuke, but be very careful when you do that. Another explanation, Rashbam and Ramban both read this similarly, that the sin is the sin of hating the person in your heart. In other words, don't hate the person in your heart, surely rebuke that person, and by giving the rebuke, you will not bear the sin of hating that person in your heart. Okay? So the sin is a different sin, right? Not embarrassing the person in public when you give the rebuke, but it's actually you're trying to cure yourself of the sin of hating that person in your heart. And Nachmanides sort of spells this out. He says that it is the way of those who hate a person to cover up their hatred in their hearts. Does this sound familiar to anybody? It's much more different. It's very easy and common to carry around the grudge, to carry around the hatred with us, because initiating those tough, raw, tender, honest, brave, as Renee Brown has spoken about, those courageous conversations, that's hard work. And so we keep it inside, and the Torah here is saying, no, you got to make sure to have those conversations. A third, totally different explanation comes, of course, from the Kli Yakar, who says that what's going on here is if you don't give rebuke, then the sin of the person who you watch commit a sin is going to be on you. You're going to bear the sin that person, because how can anybody get better if you never tell them when it is that they've gone wrong? And he quotes the story that we all know well of the person sitting on the boat who decides to drill a hole in the boat and says, you know, when fellow passengers say, what are you doing? And he says, mind your own business. This is my boat, right? Or them drilling under me. And they say, hey, if water comes in the boat, you're sinking all of us. Kli Yakar has a vision of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zebazed, that the whole Jewish people are bound with one another, and what one person does influences and counts for all of us. That we should care about our fellow Jews, that we should care about each other enough to say, because by hurting you, you're actually hurting me too. And I'm not going to take any questions today, but you can ask me a Kiddush. The thing which I want to talk about here is the Kli Yakar then goes on to write as follows. He says, you know, we actually don't give rebuke very well, because there's a little bit of us that just doesn't do it well. The rabbi said we don't do this very well anymore. It's actually been forgotten how to give rebuke well. That is a tradition that nobody knows how to do the right way anymore. And he says there's even some Schadenfreude, right? When we see somebody else messing up, it makes us feel better, that we are living a more holy, beautiful life than they are. And he says that this attribute has plagued our people since senseless hatred destroyed the second temple until this very day. It has not departed. This plague has spread. And he says it's gonna be here with us until God comes and removes this stone from among us, meaning at the days of the Messiah. We are fated to live in a world where we don't give rebuke very well. And I think part of what he's pointing at is that when you give rebuke, there is embedded within rebuke a sense of judgmentalism. That I know better than you what you know for yourself. And that very quickly slides into being superior, being smug, and giving rebuke not from a place of holiness and humility and caring, but actually from a place of either Schadenfreude or wanting to feel superior. And I think he's right that that is human nature, but I don't want to give up, and I don't think he's arguing that we should give up on rebuke. Because, let me put it this way. Many of you know that Jennifer and I spent the last 3 weeks, month in Atlanta. And we were with Jennifer's mother as she lived the final days and weeks of her life and left the world a little more than a week ago. And we were in her, Jennifer's aunt's apartment, her mother's sister's apartment. And I will never forget one thing that her aunt said to me as we were getting closer to saying goodbye. She said, "This was one of the most special months of my life." And of course, part of that was the time that she spent with her sister, but part of it was also the time that she spent with us, and that she spent having lots of people come and visit and bring food, and feeling that sense of connection that we get when other people are in our lives and we don't live so lonely. We in America have an architectural ideal. I remember growing up going to Potomac Pool. It was the community swimming pool. And sometimes the sign of status is, well, you have a pool in your own backyard. And I want to question whether or not that's so good. It was really nice to go to the community swimming pool because you met other people and you saw other people and you checked in with them and you talked and you played and you shared that experience of swimming. And I don't know that we are helping ourselves by building pools and hot tubs and in our backyards, and by creating pieces of property that have fences and that keep us safe and other people out, because they ultimately make us feel lonely. And there's something very rich about a life that is lived in connection. And so the challenge that I take from these verses and the Kli Yakar's statement is, how is it that we can create a community where we are really part of each other's lives on an ongoing basis, where we invite other people into our lives, and yes, even sometimes to say to us, you made a mistake, without becoming a community that is judgmental and nosy and inappropriate and hurtful and painful. And I think that we have a wonderful community that is respectful and not judgmental and caring for each other. And I want to make sure that we also are, even and especially during this time of pandemic, that we are still opening up our lives to each other and sharing our lives together. Shabbat Shalom.